Hello guys, welcome back. We're going to do some more practice run review. I think this is our first prompt where you actually wrote the prompt. And I'll be looking at those responses today or tomorrow to give you some individualized feedback. But just so everybody can benefit from looking at this prompt together, I want to kind of go through and tell you what I thought, okay? All right, so looking at the Q1-1A, I really wanted with the content areas that are on the exam this year, you have content area 6, content area 5, 2, 3, 4, we knew that, but the 5 and the 6, the global areas that are there really emphasize a lot of precious media. The thing that the artwork is made out of is really important to how the thing works. So I thought we needed a question just in case they pulled something up that was highly featured media, okay? So that's what this question does. The work shown is the Q1-1A from the Ashanti peoples of South Central Ghana, created in 1700 CE. The work's materials are viewed as culturally significant within the Ashanti peoples, okay? Select and identify, we know we're not going to see that. It's probably just going to say select without identify since we're not getting any points for identify, but we'll play along. Select and identify another work that incorporates gold or another metal alloy as media and is also deemed to be significant by the artwork's culture of origin. Okay, so another thing that uses metal, specifically gold or metal alloy. It says describe the visual characteristics of both the Q1-1A and your selected work that indicates specific cultural significance. All right, so here we go with the action stuff, right? Circle, okay. Explain. All right, right off the bat, guys, this is what I've been seeing more of what College Board will do. Underline both and, underline at least one, both and. I think that's really, really helpful for knowing when one statement like this really has two things to do in it. Doesn't happen all the time, so I don't want you to assume that's always the case. You need to read every part of the prompt and make sure you're answering all parts of the question. But we definitely want to box these words because they're telling us, hey, there's more to do here than just one simple, easy little thing. So at least one and both and, at least one, both and. I think that's how you're likely to see it, and I just want you to make note of that when it happens, okay? The other words that we're focusing on, how, if I see that anywhere, there's a how, okay? So, you know, let's see, from both works, just to make sure I know there's two. Okay, so now we're ready to go on to key phrases here. You selected a word that indicates special. Okay, so we have to say what visual characteristics indicate that this is something that is culturally important, culturally significant. Why? What are the features of this thing that essentially make people venerate it so much, right? And we could do that with any of our suggested pieces down here. The Maze Cob, Tutankhamun's tomb, innermost coffin, the nose ornament from the Chavan culture, and the wall plaque from Benin City that features the Oba in attendance, right? Those are your suggested ones there. So I guess we could go off list with a couple of other suggestions. We have a lot of artworks that are made of metal alloys, right? Brass, bronze. There's all kinds of things that we could talk about there, but we'll move ahead for now. Describe the visual characteristics, selected work, special cultural significance. Next phrase, explain at least one difference. I like how you guys are doing that. There's similarity. I can do that. And I'll do that more. Okay. Similar. First, we're talking about how they're different. Then we're talking about how they're the same. And then how these materials were manipulated. Okay. There's a how. I overlooked that. Okay, and the art making process, that's the focus of that question. Down here, how the artist's choice of materials supports a specific culturally significant idea or concept, right? We can do either one. And then use specific VE or CE about both of those in your explanation. All right, we're getting closer to being able to label points here, but I'm gonna go back and check the evidence points. Visual characteristics. I don't see anything about form or subject matter, so I'm gonna assume that that's both. VE, right? That's both subject matter or content form. There we go. Using specific visual evidence from both works. All right, that's got to be visual evidence. So I'm talking about subject matter or form or composition, however you want to say that. Explain at least one similarity and how the artist's choice of material supports a specific culturally significant idea or concept. Okay, I don't think we need to underline that anymore, but we need VE or CE, and we need it from both of those in our explanation. Okay, we're ready to go back and do some points now. I've got a T1, T2, okay, where I describe characteristics about specific cultural significance about both of those works. Both and tell me I've got 2 points there. Okay, use specific visual evidence from both works, explain at least one difference in how these materials are manipulated in the art making process. Now, I'm going to go ahead and mark this as a T3. But if you saw that word both from both works and you assume that you had to do a T4 there, we're basically saying the same thing. It's just the points might line up a little bit differently when it's time to score the actual response. So if you put T3, T4, don't panic. It's okay. You're just making sure that we have all the parts of the question answered. Okay. And, if College Board gives us 1 point, great. If they give us 2, great. We've done our job either way. Explain at least one similarity then in how the artist's choice of materials supports a specific culturally significant idea or concept. And then they broke it and said, use evidence from both. All right, this is where I think we have a triangle. We have a similarity that we have to explain. So here's my T4. And we have to have evidence from both what we selected. Okay, so there's my T5 and T6. Okay, so a 3-part challenge at the end of my prompt. A 1 or a 2 point challenge in the middle, definitely 2 points there. So now I'm ready to kind of map it out. I'm going to do that really small down here. Okay. I also want to do one today for you guys where you don't have this printout. Okay. So I'm going to show you how to do that in a second. But T1, T2, I lay awake at night brainstorming different ways that we could do this, but I hope this is helpful. T3, using specific visual evidence from both works. One difference, I need arrows that are going out. I need the idea parked in the middle. The idea there is that one difference in how the materials are manipulated. So I'm going to put materials in there, just get my noggin in the right place. I'm going to put my T3 there. Is it VE? Yeah. That's VE too. That's VE. That's VE. Okay. So we need to probably, okay, now we're talking about similarity. We're talking about either or, probably going to go to context here, but that means that we have a similarity at the top of our pyramid and idea parks itself in the middle, and we have to use evidence from both works. Okay. So here's my T4. Here's my T5. Here's my T6. Okay. All right. I hope you guys can see my little bitty drawing there, but this is pretty straightforward. T4, let's look at that similarity about the artist's choice of materials. Okay. So how do the materials themselves, this is materials process, right? This is the choice of materials. And all of this is tied to basically cultural significance. So I could be writing that everywhere, but I'm not going to. Choice of media. And then this is VE or CE, whatever I feel the strongest to use as I support my answer. Okay? I hope that helps. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I kind of think that this will be the format, but every time I say that, then something changes. So don't quote me, but all right, we've got that one kind of mapped out. If you were talking about what to say, right, the Siko Dwa Kofi and the point of a review here, it is made of wood and it is covered in gold. I saw some of you mention that on your worksheets as solid gold. That is not the case. That is repoussé gold that's wrapped around a wood core. And it's basically designed off of wooden stools that are seats or chairs in the houses community houses of the men that we see in this picture, other men around the culture. They all have a wooden stool that represents them. They even turn it over when they leave the hut and then come back so that nobody takes it. It's their spot. It represents them when they aren't there. This is essentially a symbolic stool, right? Supposedly delivered from the gods to the first ruler, the first king, that shows the will of the people to rule. And whoever owns it, whoever takes care of it, basically becomes the Asanta Hena, the king. So the idea is you've even got its own little throne over here that sits right next to the Asanta Hena. If you could see this picture in color, you would see gold everywhere. You would see even kente cloth that is vibrantly colored with gold. These sword hilts have their own little decorations. I mean, gold in Ghana is one of its chief well-known exports, and it's symbolic of the country as well as the people. If you look down here, just some subject matter. These are hollow little people, right? Little shells that have been covered in gold plate. They represent possibly nations that have come under control of the Ghana, and they're attached at the top to that seat. You also have some brass bells here that are attached to the thing on either side. And if you move it, they're going to ring. So it's partly an alarm, but partly also let you know when it's approaching in a procession. The structure of the seat is kind of like a support, and it has arms, right, that reach up and hold the person who would sit here. But really, this is not for sitting. No one's going to defile the power of the ruler by turning that up and making it a throne. And you know the story about the revolution against the Brits for that. The commander basically asked for this and found out really quick that was not what you do. So in terms of the context of the court, you guys can see we have a decorated Santa Hena who's sitting on a platform there. You can barely see. But the seat, the Sika Dwa Kofi, the golden stool, gets its own chair too. So we get a lot of information about media from those culture shots there. But in terms of a review, hopefully that's helpful. The maize cob is an Inca piece that shows up in the image set, and it is a hollow form shape of silver and gold alloys. It's probably something that came out of the Kori Kancha, because that was the sacred temple that was completely covered in gold. And in the courtyard of the Kori Kancha, there was this little miniature garden. Maybe even some of the mummies of former rulers were there, but they were basically looking at like a mini model of the empire, and it was kind of like having everything at your disposal. And the maize cob is part of that. Maize is what you make chicha from. It's a drink like beer. It's also a food. So in Incan culture, where agricultural land is sparse because of the mountains, that represents almost life. And having a gold silver version of that, probably eternal life, right? You'll always be productive. Tutankhamun's tomb, the innermost coffin. This is the coffin that's nested inside 3 or 4 others. It is the one that is made out of solid gold, and it's encrusted with all kinds of things like onyx, turquoise, several other things as well. So it has a significant amount of decoration and color, and symbolism just screams this King Tut will live forever. So there's a lot of imagery we could talk about there. The nose ornament, guys, you remember the Chavan culture. This is basically a culture very, very early before the Incas that sets up a religious site at Chavan de Hontar. And anybody who's associated with that site as a priest or a high official probably has some gold ornament like the one that's in the image set. So it goes along with that culture. People would come to Chavan, learn the culture of that mysterious lands on Stele, return to their part of the world, whether it was on the coast or in the highlands, and this would help make sure that people knew who they were. Of course, you guys know the Oba in attendance, the wall plaque in Benin City. That is part of, it's like one in a series of tons of plaques made up of cast brass. And it's there to show you literally a mini history of all the Obas who have come before. Gives you some terrific visuals to use in terms of, hierarchical scale and heraldic composition. Also give you some symbolic imagery in the background with Olakun, the god of the waters, referenced there. So any of these would work really, really well. I don't think you really need to go off list here. because you've got so many good things to choose from. So let's see here. Now, Q1-1A and your selected work, what are the visual characteristics that indicate specific cultural significance? All right, so I've just given you a whole host of ideas for that. I don't think I need to do T1 or T2 much longer. This is where it gets interesting. This is where you combine the two together, explain at least one difference in how these materials are manipulated in the art making process. So you literally have to know how they're made. This is repoussé, so it's hammered thin and then shaped into a form, probably on a wood form, and then the panels are pulled off and put together. This still has the wood inside of it, so the gold goes on the surface once the stool is built. The nose ornament is meant to be worn, while this is meant to be, symbol of a chair. The coffin, its role in the tomb means that it's playing a large role in the afterlife. And it has to be solid. I mean, literally solid. This is what protects the mummy of the pharaoh. And if the mummy is messed up, then the pharaoh doesn't get to go any farther than his Ka statue, right? The wall plaque in Benin, this was an oral culture. This is history, folks. This is literally something that you have to have in order to understand lineage, in order to understand an individual Oba's claim to, the descendants of the past. I mean, this is all about legitimacy and establishing yourself as part of a noble tradition that's gone on and on and on and on. Those are lots of reasons why we would see this as specific cultural significance. Explain at least one difference in how these materials are manipulated. I'm forgetting. You guys remember the manillas from the Portuguese that were melted down to make the wall plaques? Well, the Obas were the only people who could do trade with the Portuguese when they showed up. So even the media itself would show us that these guys, that's a culturally significant idea. I think that's everything. Explain difference. Maze Cobb, Nakori Concha, Tutankhamun's tomb, deep within the tomb, a vessel of salvation. The nose ornament, a signifier of someone who is tied to the culture of Shavan. Basically, I'm trying to remember the word of the visionary oracle culture, where you go, you get advice, and you find out what the Lanzon Stele is telling you. In the wall plaque. So I think the art making process tells us it's basically easy to come up with lots of differences there. This is cast, right? Maize is hammered out. This is gold that's wrapped around the stool. This is solid gold that's probably cast. This work is probably also cast. So I hope that helps give you some ideas about how to talk about those works. Let's go on to this last question. Explain at least one similarity in how the artist's choice of materials supports a specific culturally significant idea or concept. We could say concepts like the divine, right? We could say concepts like kingship. We could say concepts of the afterlife, I guess. So just looking at that list, I've got an array of ideas or concepts that this stuff is going to help me with. Now I just got to find one that's similar, right? Could we say maybe there's a relationship between the Q1-1A and the nose ornament in that they're symbolic, right? That they both have an idea that's inherent to the culture. They're not meant to be functional items that are used. This is for decoration. This is for symbolism, right? Maybe we could say choice of material specifically. Okay. If King Tut's supposed to live unblemished and untouched, the gold is what's insulating him against anybody who would mess with his mummy. We could say this, as long as you take care of this, the will of the nation will be honored. Therefore, they have like a caretaker role, right? All right, we could say the similarity between the maize cob is like a little image of something that's important to the culture, right? These little figurines down here that represent or symbolize the nations attached to the Ashanti. I mean, basically, there are lots of different ways you could connect. And until I have this work side by side another, it's kind of hard to put those into perspective but I'm hoping that when I read these, you will have had a lot to say, okay? You've got the diagram. You can see how it's broken out. Again, if you're breaking these things apart as like T3, T4, and you actually came up with 7 points, you're fine. Don't worry about it. If you come out, on the other hand, with only 3 things to do, 1, 2, 3, I'm going to reach through the computer and like smack you because we've been working way longer on this stuff and you should know better. Okay. So look for multiple tasks in each step and I think we'll be fine. All right. I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to go on to the next idea.